and welcome to another episode of Straight Out of Camera, proudly sponsored by Fujifilm South Africa. Joining me live in studio is Managing Director of TechSmart.co.za, Mike Hubert. Mike, how are you doing, sir?
All well, how are you?
I'm very well, and live from Cape Town, commercial photographer Leon Oosthuizen. How's it, Leon?
I'm well, thank you. Let's chat with you guys.
So today we're chatting about wedding photography and especially HSS wedding photography. And Leon, how easy is it to start shooting off-camera flash?
A lot easier than it used to be. In the days before, you couldn't see your exposures after you shot in any case, so you had to know a little bit about your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO and be comfortable with that. But now with flash, it added that extra component that's also kind of mysterious. And with studio lights, at least you had modeling lights, so you could see where the shadows fall, where the light goes. But with strobes, the typical hot shoe style that you see on most cameras, that's really hard because people don't understand what you don't see. So you've got to experiment. And on film, that is really tough. But with digital, it's come along, and now you can experiment a little bit more. And the last couple of years, technology's come along even more. So you can now put on a controller on your camera and shoot with those lights off camera with full TTL control, which is through the lens. It's automatic metering, and it tries to balance out your exposure. And as we know, the technology is getting better and better. So it takes care of a lot of the thinking, a lot of the technical stuff, so you can get on to making the images.
Mike, how important is it for you to further your brand as a wedding photographer by making sure that you connect with the photographer and providing the end result they require or they would appreciate?
Well, I think it's extremely important. If you don't deliver the images, then I think you failed. But it's also very important to establish beforehand. Set the expectations, manage expectations. They always say. So make sure that your client knows typically what type of photography you're doing. I mean, we've spoken to Tim Moorman before, who shoots very much like a documentary style for a wedding, and then you get the classic portraiture where you get those perfect shots of all the different elements of the wedding. But it's extremely important that your client knows exactly how you're going to shoot, and then that they have browsed your portfolio and know how your images look like.
Leon, do you have perhaps a photographer that has influenced your HSS images?
Yes, there's a number of them. But the first and foremost one, I think, that got me started with seeing the way that I can use my standard on-camera hot shoe flash a bit better was a guy called David Hobby from the Strobist. And even now on his website, there's a whole bunch of really helpful tips and projects and stuff just to get you started, and then expand your knowledge a little bit by looking at guys like Mr. Mortner. I think, what is his, I can't remember what his first name is, but he's a National Geographic photographer as well, and wedding photographer. And then Joe McNally, he's got a couple of books out, the Hot Shoe Diaries is what I recall one being called. They're so informative and conversational because he's an old hand at this, and he really knows his way around making light in a way that doesn't look like it's artificial. It just looks like, oh my goodness, how does he always get this beautiful light? But he makes it. And he does it with a lot of small speed lights, and I think it's great.
I think for some of the photographers out there that's starting out, it's important to remember that there's two things that can majorly improve the look and feel of your photos, and that's number one, learning how to edit properly, and then also off-camera flash. I think it's a step up for many photographers to learn how to do that.
brandlive.co.za. Have you ever thought about the power of social media? Social media has the power to make your business grow. Yeah. Why don't you let us manage your social media? Because our business is to see your business grow. Visit us at www.bstownmedia.co.za.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
Brand Live.
No doubt.
Harnessing the power of talk radio.
brandlive.co.za.
Warren James Krieger's visual journey through the arts began in his teens with the smell of oil paint and turpentine in his mother's home studio. Warren went on to study graphic design, but it was, however, behind a camera during his travels that he found his true creative voice, visiting over 30 countries and clicking all the way. Warren makes his living through wedding and retail portraiture, while he's also a partner in DPC, one of South Africa's leading photography training institutions. On top of this, he's a Fujifilm South Africa brand ambassador. Here to talk about wedding photography and off-camera flash, Warren, welcome to the Straight Out of Camera podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You said your artistic journey started in a painting studio. How did this eventually influence your photography?
So, starting out, I was learning painting techniques, how light works, how to actually mix color to bring, to show shade and highlight and things like that. So when I moved over to photography, I found that a lot of that information, especially on the color composition side, was still applicable. The only difference that I feel it made was I had started the journey mixing paints and putting it on a canvas. So the way that I saw a scene, I would say, is a bit different than if I just started out as a photographer in the beginning. It gave me a different perspective to the scene in front of me.
And then your progression into wedding photography, how did that happen?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. My brother, he was getting married down in Hermanus. And I'd gotten into photography on my travels because it's difficult to obviously cart an easel and paints around. So I was looking for a different way to sort of express my creative side, and photography fitted the bill. So I was self-taught. I got some books just to teach me the technicalities around photography. So I'd been doing photography as a serious hobby for quite some time. And my brother was getting married in Hermanus, and a couple of months before his wedding, his wedding photographer actually called him up and said, "Look, Daryl, due to personal reasons, I can't go down to Hermanus. I need to stay up in Gauteng. But yeah, are some photographers I can refer." Daryl came to me and he said, "Look, Warren, I can't go through the process now of finding a new photographer. Can you do my wedding images for me? You've got a decent amount of gear, and I know you've been doing it for a while." So I was sort of thrown in the deep end. And on the day, I actually realized I got to see more of their wedding day than what I would have as a guest, or just on his side. I got to see Kerry Lee getting ready and all the different parts of the day. And best of all, I realized, listen, all these skills that I picked up in my travel photography, I can actually apply now on a wedding day. So as my first wedding, the images came out really good. Kerry Lee's a hairdresser. So as hairdressers do, they chat a lot. She had my images out where she was working, and that sort of led to a referral program. And the penny dropped for me. I was like, hey, listen, if I do this for a bit of bucks, I can buy that next lens. So that's how it evolved into the business that it is now. Obviously, it's a lot more established and but that's how it started off. That's how I got into wedding photography.
Warren, so how many years have you been in wedding photography per se, and also how did the relationship with you becoming a lecturer at DPC and then now partner of DPC, how did that relationship start?
Okay, so Daryl's wedding was in 2011. But I would say my business started 4 years ago. That's when I actively decided, okay, let me launch this as a business, as something, as an ongoing concern, and sort of grow it as its own entity. And then DPC, how that happened, Dani Bester, the founder of DPC, invited me to one of his classes. And we sort of clicked from the get-go. He knew my mother is a renowned painter in South Africa, and he knew about her, and that sparked conversation. And we just realized that there was a lot of similarities that we had in our outlook towards the arts and photography. So Dani offered to actually take me under his wing and mentor me as a photographer, which we discussed a few things, and I gladly accepted. And that's how the relationship started. And I guess, it grew into a friendship. And then Dani sat me down one day and he said, look, I really like the way that we work together, and let's actually get you involved in DPC.
That's like it. Now, coming on from that, look at your portfolio as well. You developed a very particular style of how you approach your subjects in portraits, specifically regarding lighting. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about how your styles developed that way.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said in the beginning, I feel that starting out as a painter definitely, how do I say, it directed me into a very particular and unique style. So that had an influence. And then, I classify my style. If you ask me, Warren, what is your style of photography? I'd say it's art-inspired photography with a fusion of romantic fashion flair. Yeah, it sounds pretty fancy, eh? So what that means is, I spent a lot of time when I was traveling. I would go to the big museums. I'd spend a lot of time sort of absorbing that atmosphere, jazz clubs. I've always been interested in that. And I think that has culminated into the sort of dramatic, romantic style that's been a natural progression from those experiences. On the technical side, I quickly found out that to soak up the mood of the atmosphere, I needed to use off-camera flash. And that allowed me to sort of light my subject up in a way that still absorbed the ambient light. So my off-camera flash work started out of me just actually seeing the beautiful landscape behind me, realizing, but if I expose for my subject in front of me, I'm going to be blowing out all the beautiful skies and a lot of the shadow detail, which I love. So then I had to equip myself with lighting skill, and off-camera lighting then became quite a big part of my style. Although I won't say my style centered around it. My style is actually centered around what I pick up from the scene in front of me. My clients have a large part to play in it. The dynamic between them will also determine how I take the photograph. But yeah, on the technical side, I definitely, off-camera flash is just a tool that I use often to achieve the look that I'm going for.
Okay, so for those photographers out there that haven't started with off-camera flash yet, it's certainly a way to kind of get your images to the next level. Do you have some hints and tips for people who want to get started?
Yes, definitely. I would say first learn on-camera flash as well as what you can. I spent a long time just understanding bounce light, understanding how to flag my flashes, my on-camera flash light, so that it doesn't project forward if that's not what I wanted to do. And just start off by learning how to control the one light on your camera until you're getting really good results, and then move that one light off camera and just take note of how it's affecting the scene in front of you. Pay very close attention to the shadows and how the off-camera flash is affecting the shadows. And then once you're comfortable with that, you can start introducing more lights onto the scene. And once you're comfortable with that, you can start adding color gels and all the other fancy modifiers and things that we use in our photography every day.
Now, there's extra component there that's also kind of interesting lately because technology has come on and there's a lot more brands doing interesting things. But the guys exploring the flashes will quickly figure out that normally you'd hit the ceiling at whatever your camera's sync speed is. That's the maximum shutter speed at which your flash will fire and still expose the whole image. Tell us a little bit about how you wrangle that particular scenario.
Okay, so I think what you're asking me is high-speed sync and how that affects the image. Is that right?
That's it.
Okay, so high-speed sync technology has improved a lot. When I started using the flash, it was, your native camera's sync speed is what you kind of had to stick by if you weren't using your brand's native speed light. So then we had to put a filter in front of our lens so that our shutter speed could come down. Okay, it starts with your f-stop to be technical. So you want a shallow depth of field. You choose a wide aperture. The problem that you have is that at that wide aperture, at the sync speed, the background's going to be blown out. Everything's going to be too light. So to correct that, you need to put a filter in front of your lens to bring the actual exposure down to where you can pick up the scene correctly. Now, what high-speed sync does is it allows you to shoot at speeds over your camera's sync speed. And so now you can shoot at f2.8, 8,000th of a second, which is more or less what you at ISO 100, which is what's going to bring down daylight exposure. And the high-speed sync factor on the flash allows you to shoot at that speed without any filters. So that was a long-winded explanation, but that's in essence what it does.
Basically, the new tech now allows you to shoot basically at any of your camera speeds and still be able to flash.
Basically, yes.
Warren,
well, the important part there is choosing a wide aperture. You see, if you're happy to shoot at f11 all the time, you don't need high-speed sync. But the minute you want to start separating the background through your depth of field, then you do need that high-speed sync ability.
Warren, we're very fortunate in the Fuji stable that we've got wedding photographers with personality. But when I got married in my small little town in Port Elizabeth 7 years ago, photographers were, I don't know, they think they're unique and special and they need to be treated better than what the actual people getting married should be. So I just want to know, how do you interact with your couple? How do you set them at ease? You know, is there special things that you do just to make sure that you capture that, you know, consistency, especially in all your weddings that you shoot? You've got a certain way that you want to shoot and you want to sort of get everybody to have that ease with you. Is there special tips and tricks that you do?
So that's a good question, Esley, because, I realized very early on that if I want fun, natural-looking images, my clients actually need to be having fun and they need to feel at ease. And that's my job as a wedding photographer, is to make sure that I create the atmosphere that's going to allow them to be comfortable and be themselves and let their personalities come through. If I don't do that, in my opinion, I'm not successful as a portrait photographer, because after all, portraiture is about capturing personality. So I definitely look. I understand when a couple comes onto a photo shoot for the first time. My clients are typically young professionals, or people who don't spend their life in front of a camera. So it can be an intimidating process. It's important for me to click with my clients before I start clicking, if that makes sense. I need to set them at ease. I need to let them know, listen, the responsibility doesn't lie on you to create great images. That's why you're hiring me. And then a few tips I have is just start off with very casual things that they do every day. Holding hands, walking down a lane, chatting to each other. They've got a lot of things to say about the experience, but they don't necessarily want to say it when you are in earshot of that. So allow them to walk out a little bit. You're going to get them laughing. You're going to get them sort of relaxed. Take pictures of them just interacting with each other. And once they are comfortable with that, you show them a few pics on the back of the screen, and then they get that aha moment. Oh, wow, okay, that looks great. And then they give you the confidence. They put their confidence in you, and then you can start working with more styled pictures, and in between all of that, evoking emotion and natural moments as well.
Warren, how do you go about marketing yourself? Is it word of mouth? Do you put a lot of work through social media?
So my main stream of marketing is organic ranking in Google. I spent a lot of time researching how to get my web page onto the first page or the top 3 positions in Google. It took a couple of months' work, late nights, a lot of frustration. I sort of muscled through it because at that point I couldn't afford 8,000 or 10,000 rand a month for somebody to do it for me. So that's how I sort of got into it, over and above the word of mouth. Obviously, word of mouth, like I said, Kerry Lee showed pictures. I got inquiries through that. But what sort of expanded the amount of work I was getting in was working with Google. I am at the moment looking at different inbound content marketing strategies and expanding my digital marketing into other areas. And then the next phase will be more the expos and sort of face-to-face marketing, although I've found a lot of success with digital marketing.
Warren, just on that one, on a previous podcast, we actually had a chat about the relevance of expos and all that. Have you participated in any of those before? And if so, what has your experience been?
So I haven't participated for my brand. I have for the second brand that I have, Blue Lace Studio, which is I'm in partnership with Trompie van der Berg. But for my brand, I haven't participated in expos outside of Avianta inviting me for their viewings, but that's not a paid expo. The reason I have not done the expos yet is because I pay a lot of attention to my branding and how my brand projects itself. If I do the expos, I want it to be on the same level as what my digital portfolio looks like. So I'm still wrapping my head around that. I do think it is on the cards for the future because, for nothing else, I think you get to connect with a lot of other vendors as well. You get to you definitely get a lot of feet going by, but it's not something that has attracted me from the get-go. I think there's a lot of mistakes that can be made when you go to an expo if you haven't really done your due diligence on it.
Warren, how's the wedding photography scene changed in the last few years?
Wow, dramatically. There's a huge influx of new upcoming photographers. I do think in our economic climate, I do think it has forced a lot of people to try and have second businesses or try and do something on their own. So there's been a huge influx of wedding photographers on the scene, which I don't always think is a bad thing. It just means that you need to sharpen your pencil and make sure that the message you're putting out there is clear enough that your ideal client is not going to miss it, because there is a lot of noise around in the marketplace at the moment. So I'd say that's been the biggest change that I've picked up in the industry over the last few years.
Warren, chat to us a little bit about DPC and what sort of courses you guys conduct there.
So DPC is the brainchild of Dani Bester. Dani started it in his home studio many years ago. And Dani is, if you meet Dani, he is a natural teacher. He loves sharing information. He loves debating about things. He is very passionate about the arts and the art of photography, and he's put a lot of study into it. So DPC is definitely an overflow of all the input that he's put into himself. Dani has been, we're privileged enough to have really, really good lecturers on board. If you compare it to a lot of the other colleges, including international colleges, the level of the lecturers is exceptionally high. So we present short courses, the main course being the basic to intermediate course, which is a comprehensive 8-week course teaching you all the basics around photography, how to use your camera. It touches on composition, color. There's practical sessions that are involved, so you actually practically get to experience the camera and use it out in the field under a professional's guidance. And then we do workshops. We've got Trompe and I present the wedding workshop. There's a studio workshop, posing workshop. So we focused on the working professional as well as people who can't be full-time students of photography. We've given them a way to do evening classes while still adding to their skill set and actually producing professional results.
Warren, when you work on your images or when you have a creative vision, I mean, you obviously because of your art background and all that, we've spoken a little bit before. You shoot quite a lot of weddings during the year, and then the treatment of those images afterwards, the fulfillment exercise. How do you manage that? Maybe speak a little bit into what that workflow looks like.
So my post-processing, I haven't been editing weddings for about 3 years now, probably a little bit over 3 years. I saw early on that although I enjoy editing, the style that you see out there is my editing style. But to actually sit down and edit for 10 or 12 or 15 hours, I just found that counterproductive. So I found an editor. I spend a lot of time. I've had 2 editors that I've worked with. I spend a lot of time upskilling them in the way that I edit. I give them presets where to start off from, and then I sort of, for instance, Manette now, I think I spent about 3 months with her intensively, where she would sit with me editing a wedding. I'd explain what I'm looking at, what's important for me. But I really believe to excel as a wedding photographer, it's something that should be outsourced, or you need to get help in handling it, because it is what bogs a wedding photographer down. So the time that I would now spend, the 2 or 3 days in editing, I can now spend on working on new photography skills, networking, building my business in other ways. So I do work with an editor the whole time, but with the album design as well. She does my album design for me. But we will sit down and we will review our design guidelines, the design assets we're using at that stage. Does it need to be refreshed? Do we need to bring in new themes, that sort of thing? So it's under my guidance all the time, but it is outsourced for me.
Warren, do you use second shooters? And if you do, how do you pick one that has a similar style to you, so that the editing process is just so much easier?
So that's a good question, Isley. A lot of photographers hire second shooters gig by gig. They might have 3 or 4 that they enjoy working with. I found that to be a bit counterproductive. So what I do is I take on an intern for a year, and I put that intern through a specific program where I will upskill them, and by the end of the year, I'll help them get a portfolio together. But it's important for me that my second shooter is somebody that grows with me. Because I have a very particular style, I need that person to understand my workflow before they actually start contributing to the images. I have on occasion, when my intern's not available, I do use a second shooter, but then it'll be somebody in the DPC community, which I know has gone through the correct courses. I know that they are shooting at a level that I'm happy with. But with that said, I will then take over majority of the shots, so that I'm not relying on the second shooter's images for a certain part of the day.
Warren, where can we find you on social media and on the internet?
Okay, so my website is warrenjames.co.za. I am on Instagram. The links are on my website. I'm on Instagram and Facebook mostly. I do have a Google Plus page as well as a Twitter account. Isley, I don't have all the handles on hand, but from my website, you can navigate to all my social media platforms. So I'd say a good starting point is the website. I have written an article about how I got into photography, my involvement with music through the years, as well as my more recent involvement with Fujifilm and what that has brought to the table as well. It's all on my website.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Warren, for joining us joining us on Skype and chatting to us about your photography.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Gentlemen, where can we find you on social media?
You can visit our website, All About Technology, at www.techsmart.co.za, and then for some of my photography, head to Fark1 on Instagram.
And I'm at leonslens.com. Otherwise, on Instagram, it's just Leon Oosthuizen. That's my handle.
Thank you very much for joining us at SOC_live. You can follow us on all our social media channels. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks.
brandlive.co.za